Hey, what's going on YouTube? So today we're going to be doing a review of chapter 1033 of One Piece, my first ever review. Thank you so much for coming and checking it out. I hope you guys enjoy, and if you do, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to see more content coming soon. I'm going to have a Zorro theory video coming very soon, probably within the next couple of days. But to start things off, the review of 1033. I thought it was great. I saw a couple people saying that this might be best chapter of the year or top 10 chapter of the year. I think it's definitely up there for me. I always love seeing, I'm a Zorro fan first and foremost, so I always love Zorro centric chapters, but I especially love seeing chapters where we get to learn a little bit more about Zorro's past. Zorro is one of the few crew members who, well, I shouldn't say few, but one of a couple crew members who we still don't know all that much about their actual past, like for instance who their parents are, where they were born. You know, I don't know if it's completely 100% confirmed that Zorro was born in Shimotsuki village, but obviously we know he was raised there, but again, don't know who his parents are. Now with some of the other information that we've been getting from Wano, it's starting to look like his dad might be Shimosuke Ushimaru, but we'll see. That of course hasn't been confirmed yet. But yeah, I thought this was a great chapter, huge chapter for Zorro, obviously unlocking Conqueror's Haki. I think it was bound to happen, considering the fact that Rayleigh has Conqueror's Haki and he was the first mate of the Roger Pirates, and of course, Luffy is going to be the one to surpass Roger and become the next king of the pirates. So his first mate has to have Conqueror's Haki as well. It's just a given. It has to happen. Also, I think one thing that was really interesting to me that kind of stood out was there was a quick flash of Momo. And I haven't seen a whole lot of people talking about this, but there was a quick flash of Momo outside, and it kind of looked like he was like tugging the island, like he was like pulling Onigashima, like he couldn't necessarily lift it, but he was like, it almost looks like he's put some of his flame cloud sort of around it or under it and is kind of like pulling it, which I thought was really cool and really interesting and pretty good thinking on Momo's part. Now, with that out the way, obviously the whole chapter, pretty much all of the chapter is about two people, Zorro and King. Now, I want to start with King. One thing that seems pretty interesting is that King seems to be really having fun. Like, he seems like he's really enjoying himself with this fight with Zorro. And I don't know if it's because he is just taking Zorro that lightly, or if it's because King actually has, like, some type of... I don't want to use the word kink. I want to find a better word. Kink. For punishment, I mean, he wears a gimp suit. That suggests things. But yeah, he definitely seems like he's enjoying himself. And there was even a moment where Zorro landed a direct hit, and King says it. He's like, oh, direct hit. But it doesn't do anything to him. He seems like he's just like marveling at the fact that Zorro, had this attack and it hit him and it's, nothing to him. And now he explodes. He explodes into like flames. And Zorro's just kind of like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with this? What is this, man? Is he a man? What is this? Am I in a matrix? He's like so confused and he can't figure out what to do about it. I do think, I think it was in the last chapter or maybe the one before that, Zorro said, I don't think I'm going to be able to defeat him until I know what he is. And some people I saw mixed reactions to that statement. And what I want to do is I want to make a callback to Alabasta. When Zorro first fought Mr. 1, or was it Mr. 2? No, yeah, Mr. 1. I'm tripping. Das Bones. When he first fought Mr. 1, and Mr. 1 was obviously steel, like he was made of steel, Zorro had to learn how to cut steel, which in turn helped him defeat Mr. 1. I think there's something I think it was the breath of all things they called it. That seems to be really important when it comes to swordsmanship, where you're dealing with something that you're not necessarily sure how you're supposed to cut it, and knowing what it is makes a huge difference for a swordsman being able to cut something versus not being able to cut something. Now, one thing that I've been kind of just like throwing around inside of my own head is that with the whole concept of Lunarians being able to summon fire or create fire, I think one thing that's a possibility is that maybe their bodies, and also I should mention in this chapter we get a little bit more exposition and clarity on the nature of the Lunarian race from Queen, where he says that long ago they were considered gods because they had the ability to survive in pretty much any natural condition, right? And the thing that kind of stood out to me, or that immediately kind of like clicked in my head, was like, okay, maybe it has something to do not just with the fact that they have wings, because that's a huge plus, especially in the One Piece world where there are no, well, Eneru built one, but there aren't really many flying machines. Is the whole fire thing, right? Like, if we know about the nature of just the human race in general here on Earth, the discovery of fire, the manipulation, the ability to control fire, create and manage fire was huge. So I think that might have something to do with the Lunarians' ability to adapt to different environments, and I think their bodies essentially have become to fire what Sea Prism Stone is to the ocean. Even though they have physical bodies, I think their bodies emit the same aura, have the same energy of fire itself, which means in order to cut King, Zorro will have to use a technique that's designed to cut fire itself, which he now has. So I think Zorro won't be able to defeat King until he realizes that, and I think he's going to have to use, of course, Kinemon's technique to cut King. And I think once he does learn that and figure that out, the tides are going to change in the battle. Now, we've seen him do damage to King's suit. Haven't really seen him do any real damage to King. That could partially be because King's entire body is covered up, so if he does have any damage, we just can't see it. But we haven't really seen him bleed, as far as I know. We haven't really seen him even gasping, honestly. His suit doesn't look damaged besides the part on his head that Zorro cut earlier. So I think that sort of little headcanon or theory of mine that King, in order to cut him, Zorro's going to have to use Kinemon's technique to cut him as if he were fire. So that's the first thing. And of course I'm going to have a little bit more theories and videos and things like that coming soon about the Lunarians themselves. But now on to Zorro. So, Zorro. I love Zorro. Not the brightest bulb. The fact that it took him this long to realize that the old man who taught him Tsunachi was Kozaburo, I mean, there's no excuse for it. He's a bit touched, that one. He's not the smartest, but he did figure it out, right? And I think this is going to be huge for Zorro, not just from a battle standpoint, remembering the things that Kozaburo told him about swords themselves and the nature of swords, but also just remembering that Kozaburo was a man from Wano who settled in the East Blue in the village that he was raised in, Shimotsuki Village. I think this is going to spurn a little bit more curiosity from Zorro, and maybe when things are all said and done, he might go back to either Kyukimaru or Tenguyama to get a little bit more context and information on exactly how Kazuburo ended up in the East Blue, right? Because if anybody knows, it would be those two. Those are the only two people left alive who might really have any insight. I mean, no, Kinemon wouldn't know. Like, nobody else would really know. Nobody's either old enough or alive to really have that information as far as how that happened. And I think that's going to be huge. And I think that's honestly going to be where some of the information that's still left that we don't know about Zorro, that's where that's going to come from. That sort of, I think it's going to be similar to what we saw with Robin at the end of Fishman Island, where she had that little side conversation with King Neptune. I think Zorro's going to have a moment like that with either Tenguyama or Kyukimaru. Now, with that being said, obviously he has to get through the battle first. I will say it is really nice seeing Zorro kind of just like think, like figure things out and kind of recall memories and say like, okay, let me look back at the rest of my life and things that have happened and see if I can piece together some information that might help me right now. Like he doesn't really do that very often, and I think it partially might be because he hasn't had a real challenge. As most of us know, many people in the community have talked about it. He hasn't had a real serious battle post time skip. The closest thing you could say would probably be no. He hasn't really had a real battle post time skip. Now, he fought in Fishman Island, but at the same time, it was like, for the most part, he was kind of like, really, just like, he was fucking Hody up. I mean, it is what it is. But I think part of the reason why is because Wano was coming. I think if you look at Zorro and Sanji, part of the reason why Oda, I think, held off on giving both of them the amount of shine that they probably would have gotten earlier in the series, like pre-time skip. Everything after Fishman Island was very much about Luffy and Law and just kind of like setting things up for the next couple of arcs. And I think now we're in the point where we're going to start seeing more arcs that are sort of driven by individual members of the crew, right? Like pre-time skip, obviously we had those types of arcs, but it was more so about having members join. So, for instance, Water 7 was Frankie and Robin. I always, you're going to learn, I always lump Water 7 and Enies Lobby together. I feel like there's no point not to. They start at Water 7, then go to Enies Lobby, then go back to Water 7. It's all the same arc to me. Same thing with Skypiea and Jaya. I put them all together. They're both Skypiea. Sue me. I don't care. But Water 7 was mostly Frankie and Robin. Pretty much all Frankie and Robin. Alabasta was pretty much Vivi. Whether you consider her as still a member of the Straw Hats or not, that's up to you. Personally, don't. But, Drum Island, Chopper. What else? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on chapter names? I mean, arc names. Gosh. Skypiea was a lot of like, it was a little bit of everybody, but it was a lot of like Robin and Usopp, I think, because Usopp saw the spirit inside the Mary. I can't remember the name, like what they call it, nor do I think I ever really knew how to pronounce it. But Usopp saw that. It was also a lot of like him trying to repair the Mary, and I think that was sort of set up for Water 7. Usopp was very heavily featured in Water 7 as well, not so much at Enies Lobby. And then like Thriller Bark, Brook, there was just like all different kinds of, and then obviously Romance Dawn, we got the little mini arcs, Baratier, Sanji, Arlong Park, Nami. Like we saw all different arcs where a different Straw Hat was sort of featured, but it was more so in the sense of them joining the crew, as opposed to now where we're seeing arcs where a certain Straw Hat might be featured, but it's not necessarily about them joining the crew, but more so about just learning more about them as an individual, or them having some sort of trials and tribulations or tests as an individual in the group. So this is just Zoro's arc. Last arc was Sanji. This arc is Zorro, and I think the next arc, a lot of people think is going to be Elbaf. I personally don't think it's. I think Elbaf will be the next big arc, But I think the next arc in general, we're probably gonna go back to Reverie. Not back to Reverie, but we're gonna go have like a little sort of Reverie type arc where it's like a mini arc where we go and we jump around and we see what's been happening outside of Wano. Because remember, the Straw Hats have no idea that Reverie happened. They don't know what took place. They don't know the warlords are gone. They don't know about SSG. They don't know about anything. They don't know about what happened to Sabo, anything. So I think the next arc after Wano is over will be that. It'll be like a mini arc where the Straw Hats kind of maybe get a newspaper. They get updated. Well, I don't know if they get updated bounties. Actually, CP0 is there, but whether or not the information gets out that the Straw Hats are the ones who defeated Kaido and Big Mom, if they defeat Kaido and Big Mom, who knows? But I think the Straw Hats probably get a newspaper. They see some stories, and then same as always, the narrator jumps around and tells us what's been going on, what's changed. We pick up some scenes with maybe Kobe and the Marines, maybe Boy Hancock, Revolutionary Army, right? Like different groups, different factions, see what they're up to and what they've been doing since Reverie ended. And then maybe we get to Elbaf. But, you know, keeping with the theme, I think a lot of people assume Elbaf will be a Usopp arc. I think so too. And then after that, it's hard to really, obviously not knowing the islands that we have to go to after that, it's hard to really picture who's next. But I do think that Lodestar Island, that's probably going to be a Nami arc. And this is something that I haven't really seen a whole lot of people mention, but I think Lodestar Island is going to be a Nami arc simply because of the fact that it's about navigation. It's the last island on the Grand Line. Nami's going to have to figure out how to get them there, number one, but also she's going to have to figure out how to get from there to Laugh-Tale, right? If they manage to find the rest of the poneglyphs, great, but the rest of the journey from here on out is not going to just be about finding poneglyphs. It's also going to be about charting the actual course from Lodestar to Laugh-Tale. She has to get those other poneglyphs, get those other locations, and then triangulate the location of Laugh-Tale and figure out how to get there from Lodestar. So I think Nami's going to have a lot of work to do come Lodestar Island when they get to the actual end of the known Grand Line. In between Elbaf and Lodestar, I don't know who's going to have the spotlight or for how long. I would imagine we probably see a little bit more of Robin, because I think she's going to become a lot more important as they get closer to the end of the Grand Line. I think more and more people, specifically the world government, are going to come after her a lot harder. They're already coming after her right now. But I think Emu and I think the world government, they're going to be watching the Straw Hats, and I think the closer they get to the Grand Line, knowing that Nico Robin is on that ship, they're going to start going at them harder and harder. And always, of course, Blackbeard as well. We've seen that even Kaido has had his eye on Robin a little bit. So I think the closer they get to the Grand Line, the more and more people, the more powers are going to try and come after the Straw Hats for Robin specifically. So she might get, maybe not a full arc, but I mean, she's already had like 1.5 arcs for her anyway. So maybe not a full arc, but something's going to happen where she's going to become really important before they even get to Laugh-Tale. Brook, I don't know if Brook's going to have anything before Laugh-Tale, but I do know after Laugh-Tale, they're going to be right on the other side, or once they get to Laugh-Tale, they're going to be right on the other side of Reverse Mountain, where Laboon is. So that might become important. I've seen some people theorize that once they get to Laugh-Tale, they'll get some information or maybe an ancient weapon or something that's going to help them knock down Reverse Mountain, and then they can just go right through to Laboon. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I do know Laboon's on the other side of that mountain, and he's banging on that wall. Now, even if they can't find an ancient weapon, if they can find something to help them get through the Calm Belt, then they could theoretically just go to, I think it's the West Blue, and go back up Reverse Mountain. like it's not that long of a journey from Laugh Tale to the other entrances of Reverse Mountain, and I think it's the West and the South Blue. Who knows? You know, maybe that's what they end up doing. But I think we're going to see something with Brook towards the end of the story, probably after Laugh Tale, maybe even after the final war. Who knows? The reunion is the word I'm looking for with Laboon might not come for quite a while, but I do think it's going to come eventually. Frankie. Now, Frankie's going to have an arc. I don't know if it's going to be a long one, but I do know at some point Frankie is going to have to meet Vegapunk. I don't know when, but I feel like in my head that's where Oda is kind of going with this. At some point, Frankie and Chopper are going to meet Dr. Vegapunk. We've heard a lot about like different doctors in the story so far, mainly Vegapunk, but then also Dr. Hogback. Chopper knew Dr. Hogback. He didn't know him personally, but he knew of him. So that lets me know that Chopper is at least tapped in a little bit to some of the other great medical minds in the One Piece world. When Vegapunk is introduced, he'll either be with or be working on whatever the SSG is, right? That's where we're going to get a lot more of the explanation as to what the SSG is and how it works. If it's a person, who is it? If it's a group of people, who are they, right? And I doubt Vegapunk is working on that alone. We've seen that Vegapunk has worked with other doctors in the past. He worked with Caesar. He worked with, I believe, Judge. Did they mention that he worked with Judge? I think so. I think Judge, Caesar, Vegapunk, and Queen all worked together at some point. I believe so. I might have to go back and check on that. But yeah, I think when they do finally introduce Vegapunk, he'll probably have other doctors working with him, and Chopper is going to learn something from one of those doctors, if not, a few of them. I think one thing that's really interesting too is that there's another doctor in the story who we've already been introduced to, who is kind of eccentric, and I think could be a person who knows Vegapunk, has possibly worked with Vegapunk before, and that's Dr. Carreja. Dr. Carreja is very old. She's also a very good doctor, and she seems to know things that other people don't know. Most other people don't know. For instance, she asked Dalton, "Do you know about the Will of D?" And she said, I believe, I might misquote here, but she said something about they will shake up the world, or it's going to be a storm, something like that. But she knows something. She knows about the Will of D. She knows about, clearly, something involving the Void Century. Now, in my head, the only people who have that knowledge are pirates, specifically very high-level pirates, like Rayleigh, like apparently Kaido, and, of course, Roger. But then also either very high-level world government officials, possibly the Gorosei. I'm sure Imu knows. But also some royalty. Like, I don't know if Cobra knows about the Void Century. I doubt he knows about the Void Century. But I know he knows enough that he clearly doesn't trust the world government, even though he's kind of a part of it. And he understands that there's a reason why his family, the Nefeltari family, decided not to go up to Marijoa. Again, Doflamingo knows. So there are people who know out there in the world, but you have to wonder how, right? If you know that Gold Roger was the only pirate to make it to Laugh Tale, then you have to find some way to explain how all of these other people know about the Will of D or about Joy Boy or whatever the case may be, right? Now, one thing that kind of stands out is that Kozuboro was outside of Wano, right? And we know that Wano was the birthplace of the poneglyphs themselves. Now, as far as we're aware, only the Kozuki clan are actually capable of reading the poneglyphs, but I don't know if they've ever actually specified. They obviously said it. The Kozuki clan can read the poneglyphs. Unfortunately, that ended at Odin's generation because Momo doesn't know, but they never really specified that only the Kozuki clan knew. It's probably that. It's probably that case, but again, they haven't specified. So as of right now, it's up in the air. And then there's also other factors, like for instance, Lady Toki. Lady Toki had a devil fruit that allowed her to travel forward through time. She came from the Void Century itself. So perhaps there were other people who had that devil fruit. Now, considering the way it works, it's probably not possible that someone else came from the Void Century. Because she only can go forward in time. But now that we know about things like Devil Fruit Awakenings, perhaps the Toki Toki no Mi, maybe the awakened version, allows you to travel backwards. And if that's the case, that could explain how someone could travel forward in time, die, that fruit gets transferred to someone else, and maybe they awaken the fruit and go back, and then the fruit is back in a different time. Time travel as a whole is a whole fustercluck of issues that I'm not going to get into right now, but it doesn't change the fact that it does exist in the One Piece world. So it's always on the table, right? Somebody could know something because someone from the past told them, or just because they were in the past themselves. It's not necessarily impossible. So I think once we get to Dr. Vegapunk, there's a couple different theories. Some people think that he'll be one of the moon people. I forget what they're called, but we do know the guy who made the Tantatas. I mean, not the Tantatas. The is it the Tantatas? No, the little robots. Whatever. But anyway, the people who made those like little robots or whatever from the moon had like huge heads. And from the little bit of Vegapunk that we've seen, it does appear that he has an abnormally shaped or sized head. So some people theorize that he might be from the moon. He might be one of the individuals from the moon, one of the moons of One Piece. Some people speculate Lunarians might be from one of the moons of One Piece. One Piece has several moons. So that's always an option. It's always a possibility. Now, I think that probably that whole Vegapunk thing, I think that probably comes either right before or right after Elbaf. And the reason why is because I think the SSG is going to be important and relevant to the final battle. So figuring out what that is going to be huge, right, for the Straw Hats. And I also think that considering the fact that the SSG was formed probably before they abolished the Seven Warlord system, because I mean the royal families of the world came together to decide to abolish the warlord system. But remember, part of the reason why it happened, why it was allowed to happen, was because the Marines and the world government feel that they can rely on the SSG in the place of the Seven Warlords, because the Seven Warlords was kind of like a broken system. They were pretty unreliable. They were scheming and doing other things illegally behind the world government's back that they weren't supposed to, and they were just generally hard to keep track of and keep control of because they were pirates. So now the SSG is supposed to be much better and possibly just as strong. So I don't think they abolished the Seven Warlord system without having a viable backup. So it's very possible that this SSG was created before the abolishment of the Seven Warlord system, which means going into Reverie, it might have already been done or close to done. So I don't know if whatever happened with Sabo has anything to do with the creation of the SSG. I don't think it's like Kuma. Like, remember, like with the pacifistas, like they had Kuma and they were working on the pacifistas while they had Kuma in custody, and they sort of combined Kuma's body with Kizaru's devil fruit, and they created the pacifistas. I think whatever's happening with Sabo is separate from the SSG. However, I do think they are both going to be introduced, or not introduced. I think they're both going to be relevant at the same time, because if Sabo is in Navy custody, the Straw Hats are not letting anything happen to Sabo. If they do get a newspaper after Wano and they see Sabo has been captured, Sabo is going to be executed, Sabo whatever, Luffy's going to go save his brother. And I think that's when we first see in the story the debut of whatever the SSG is. Now, unlike the Pacifistas, which were not really new, come Marineford, they had kind of like had a couple prototypes out there, and they had been field tested, and like they were out there for a while. We don't know if the SSG has been used yet, and by the time the Straw Hats figure out what's happened to Sabo, they're going to have enough notoriety that the world government might, or not the world government, the Marines might look at fighting against Luffy and the Straw Hats and now the Grand Fleet the same way they looked at fighting against Whitebeard. They're going to pull in all the stops. Like, they're going to call in the SSG, they're going to have the admirals there, all the vice admirals. They might not have as big of a battle as we saw with Marineford, but it's going to be some type of battle, and it's probably going to be pretty big, and we can only assume that the Revolutionary Army is going to show up as well. So, depending on how soon all this happens and also where it happens, we might see the SSG and Vegapunk before we actually get to Elbaf. It might not be a huge arc, but it might be pretty big, because I think Sabo and his health and all that is more pertinent to Luffy than just continuing on his journey. So I think a Frankie, to circle all the way back around to the original point, I think we might see a more Frankie-focused arc or sub-arc before Elbaf. So I think the way it's going to go is Wano, then sort of a post-Wano mini arc where we get a recap of everything that's going on outside of Wano, around the world. Then we're going to have some type of... I don't think it's going to be nearly as hard as Wano. I don't think it's going to be a huge battle. But I do think there's going to be some sort of battle, involving Sabo, retrieving Sabo, whatever, right? Maybe the Straw Hats are now able to catch him before he even gets to Impel Down. Maybe they don't even take him to Impel Down. Who knows, right? Whatever the case may be, I think they're going to have to deal with that first. Then after that, we probably get Elbaf, and then after that, we probably get maybe Lodestar. I'm not sure. I think Lodestar Island. I think the problem is the Straw Hats are so strong now that once they defeat Kaido, there's really not that much left in terms of challenge wise, other than the world government itself. So who knows? It might be flipped. We might get Elbaf and then Lodestar and then Laugh Tale, then we find out about Sabo, and then we have to go fight the world government. Who knows? But I think at the end of this series, there's going to be one of two different final villains. It's either going to be the world government or it's going to be Blackbeard. One of them is going to be left, where that once we defeat them, it's over. The series is pretty much done, right? The journey's over. Not the journey, but the journey to find the One Piece is over, right? So I think what's probably going to happen is we're going to have this fight with the world government first, either right before Elbaf or right after Elbaf. My gut is saying right before, and then once we get to Laugh Tale, or maybe afterwards, there's going to be a battle with Blackbeard. Either for the information or just fight to become the true king of the pirates. I think if Blackbeard somehow gets to Laugh Tale at the same time, again, like I said, after this there's going to be a lot of different groups coming after Robin. If Blackbeard does manage to secure Nico Robin, or maybe Pudding, or who knows, somebody who's capable of reading the poneglyphs, I think at that point, Blackbeard and Luffy fighting at Laugh Tale becomes a real possibility. And if that happens, obviously, you know, that's going to shake up the entire world. Especially if there is a ancient weapon on Laugh Tale, which some people suggest or suspect. Now, to get back to Zorro really quick. So Zorro finally goes all out with his haki and awakens his Conqueror's haki, right? One thing that's kind of interesting is when we talk about black blades, it's suggested that any blade can become a black blade. They don't, or Mihawk, I think, is the one who says it. He never really explains specifics as far as how that happens. Now, you would assume that it's because the constant pouring in of haki. But it's still, like I said, it's kind of like a gray area. I think if Zorro is to create a black blade, the first one will probably be the Watto. Simply because it's the one he's had the longest. And it's kind of the one that's closest to him. It's like in his mouth. It's the one that he puts in his mouth. Like, so it's the one that's kind of the most important to him. It has the most emotional significance to him. It's the one, like I said, that's been with him the longest. Sandai Kitetsu will probably be next. But I'm going to be honest, I don't see him keeping Sandai Kitetsu. I'm going to get into that in my Zorro video that I'll post later on. But I think when it's all said and done, Sandai Kitetsu, I don't think that stays with Zorro. I think that goes on to somebody else. And I'll say who else in that other video. But closing statements. Again, chapter was 10 out of 10. It was a great chapter. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next one. I'm hoping, I got my fingers crossed that my little theory about King is correct. That Zorro's going to have to use Kinemon's Foxfire technique to cut him. When that does happen, if that does happen, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, that's going to turn the tide of the battle. That's going to be the equivalent to Zorro, what, you know, Sanji, I guess, making peace with him becoming a Vinsmoke or true Vinsmoke. You know, that's going to be the same thing for Zorro that, you know, that was for Sanji. I think that's going to give him the confidence and the real sort of belief that he can actually defeat King. And I'm also looking forward to seeing King get some of his clothes ripped off. No, I shouldn't. I'm gonna try. I'm also looking forward to seeing what's underneath King's. I'm also looking forward to seeing what's underneath King's gimp suit. Oh, that's bad too. I want to see King's body. I'll be excited when King takes his clothes. If Zorro cuts King and manages to destroy his suit, we will see if Lunarians have any other physical differences from humans besides just the wings. And also, it might confirm people's theory that King was once a slave of the Celestial Dragons, because remember, the Lunarians were supposedly super strong and super durable, but they've been nearly wiped out. Only group of people capable of doing that would be the world government. Possibly with an ancient weapon. Who knows? It would depend on how long ago King's race was wiped out. Now, another thing that's important involving King and the Lunarians is that if King's race was completely wiped out and he's the last one, that would suggest that either A, King's race was not completely wiped out that long ago, or B, King is very old. Both of which are important. But, again, that's something that we're not going to know until we start to learn a little bit more about King and we actually get to see his naked... Goodbye, everybody.